Removing foil. I thought this would be a great demonstration to show at least how I have to remove foil. Now, one thing I want to point out is that this thing was made in China, so it is not square at all. You can see that. If I had made something like this, I think I would have wanted to be a little better square. See how out of square that is? Okay. But because this thing sits flat on the table, it's more sturdy for me to be able to demonstrate how I'm going to remove foil. Now, first thing I got to do is, and I know I'm not a big fan of busting the glass out, okay, and then cleaning out the hole, and then replacing it. I've had people in the shop a few times that did that, and they did such a good job that the shock from breaking the glass out traveled the adjacent piece and broke that. So instead of having one piece, then they had two pieces, then they had three pieces, then they had four pieces. For me, now these wheels come in different grades, just like sandpaper, fine, medium, coarse. This is kind of a medium, and I've used this to just kind of clean off some of the patina. Okay. People go, "Oh, you're going to scratch the glass." I said, well, you're not bearing down on the glass. You're not bearing down on it. There's a difference between, just going over it with a brush and bearing down on it so hard that you're scratching the glass. You just want to get some of the copper patina, the patina off of it. Okay. You're just lightly going over it because this has two pieces broken. So, and of course, this is Chinese solder. And that's one of the things I know a lot of folks don't like to repair Chinese shades because we're not sure what the composition of their solder is. They managed to tweak it a little bit, okay, a lot. So we're not sure what the composition is. So it does not always react well to just a soldering iron and touch it with your soldering iron, which a lot of people expect that to happen. Touch it with your soldering iron, it melts. It may or may not work. Now, one of the other things is that in order to get between the two levels of copper foil on this and this, so we don't pull it off, because it's not always pleasant to have to refoil a hole. Some folks have advocated using a strip of aluminum foil, okay, and that can work very well. I have a tendency to use strips of index card in between because it doesn't conduct heat. If you use the aluminum foil, wrap some tape around the end, okay, to insulate it, because otherwise you're trying to hold on to something that's very, very hot. Now, we're in luck. This is melting right off the bat. Okay. Maybe they have some lead or something in it. Maybe it's not quite. See? So I've got the aluminum foil in the seam. Okay. I've got it into the seam. Have to get it into the seam between. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to get a little dab of good solder that we use. Acts as a flux more so than what they used. So come on. Hey. Okay. So I've got it in there. Now I can use this theoretically to separate the solder so that like I say, use some good solder on there. I've got 50-50 on here so that we can heat it up. in between the seams and separate it, because that's what you want to do, is separate it if at all possible. Okay. Let gravity do its work. Let the solder drip off the inside. Pick it up and get out the majority. Because like I say, we're not sure what the composition of the Chinese foil is. I mean, the Chinese solder. They've tweaked it to the point where it's, God knows what it is. Maybe more lead. Maybe they're using 40-60 instead of 60-40. Okay, maybe they have some antimony in it. Maybe it's recycled. Who knows? I mean, who really knows? The only way to find out is to get it analyzed. Turn the iron up a little bit. I've got this on a rheostat, and it's all the way up. So, but that's basically what you have to do. Use some good solder, like we use. Okay. Apply it to on top of theirs. It helps it melt. See? It helps it melt. And as the aluminum foil goes through the seam, it separates the two. Now I'll have to do this all the way around, so I'm not gonna use the entire video for this, but this is what you have to really basically do to get it to work. Okay. To get it to separate. Even after I get all of the solder off and I get the seams separated, I'm still going to have to, more than likely have to, put some of the good solder on there. To separate everything. Because I want to clean out the hole. I don't want to rip off. See how it's dripping? It's not even dripping like our regular solder does. You see that? See? It's not even dripping like our regular solder does. And you can see a little gap in there. See that? Okay. So a lot of times their seams aren't all that tight. My seam will be a little bit tighter than that one. Okay. But I think a lot of folks, that's why they don't want to have to deal with working on Chinese, because they expect to take their soldering iron and touch the solder with the iron and it just melts right off, and it doesn't, because of, like I say, what they use for solder over there, and we're not sure. We're just not sure. So we have to use some of our good stuff as a kind of a flux to get it to work. Okay? And I will do this all the way around where this piece is and the other piece that's broken on the bottom. So I get this piece out fairly intact. Alright, and then use that for a pattern. Okay. But that's basically what I wind up doing to separate the two. Whether I'm working on a Chinese shade, an American shade, whoever made it, not so much important. What's important is the process that you're using to free everything up. Okay. Because you have to get the glass out. Even if you smash the glass, you still have to clean out the hole. And you don't want to tear the foil off the adjacent piece I know some of y'all have really tiny fingers, and you can copper foil inside a little tiny hole. I can't. I learned that years ago. So for me, it's worth the trouble to go through this. Trouble for me to get everything off. Okay. You know, something else that can be done is that once you get everything off, or soaked it down to very thin, so it's just barely solder on foil. You can also use a razor blade, okay, to halfway slice it off the surface. Okay, halfway slice it off the surface so that you can get the glass out without tearing the foil off the adjacent piece. See that? Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. Soaking the solder off with some good solder. Acts as a kind of a flux to get the Chinese solder to melt. Because like I say, it doesn't always melt right off the bat. Be nice if it did, but they use different stuff over there. Alright, I can't really blame them, because they're not making stuff that's like, oh, well, the Americans are going to be fixing this, so we better use some really good solder. No, doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. So, okay, and I will do this. See? Now this iron's all the way up with the rheostat. Okay. Of course, this will go into my, what I'm melting off of here will go into my scrap solder, and I will wind up using it when I remelt all of the little bits and pieces of the good solder that I have.